First thing that occurs to me is that we are being bullied by the OECD, are we not?
Even though we are not in the agreement at the moment, Pat, as you said a moment ago, I could not describe what is going on at the moment as bullying either. It is a very large and very complex negotiation, and at the end of the day, we have a choice regarding whether we want to be in it or not. And even though I do not believe we can be in the agreement at the moment, I do believe we need to stick at the negotiation. And as tough as they are and as important as they are to Ireland, I couldn't in truth describe them as bullying.
OK, but the pressure is there with 130 countries signing up, and some will label us as pariahs in some sense. We'll be labelled as tax havens, even though we have fought long and hard to avoid that label. I mean, I think we had discussions, you and I, about this, where the French were giving out to us for our low corporation tax rate, while they themselves were giving such tax breaks to companies that meant their effective rate was much lower than ours.
And what happens in many of the countries is they may have a higher rate, but there are company by company agreements put in place, sometimes involving grants, concessions. Other countries have more flexibility in their tax policy than we do. We have a single rate. It's applied across a wide range of companies and economic activity, and we do not make agreements with regard to the rate. And as regards where Ireland stands and the different labels that have been used against us in the past and even now, I think what is important will be to evaluate where different countries are with the implementation of an agreement as opposed to signing up to where we are at the moment. And I think at that point it might be fair to form a view regarding where different countries stand rather than now.
Is it possible, though, for us to get exposure for our arguments? Is that very difficult to say, hang on a second, you French people who've been calling us this and calling us that? The truth of your situation is different to the way you'd like to express it. Can we do that? Do we have a platform? And are we likely to be heard?
Well, I think at the moment, the one thing our position is not lacking at the moment, Pat, is probably exposure, because the position that we are taking and why is well known. And are we able to make the case for us and advance it? Yes, we are, in meetings that we have with different governments and with the OECD. Is there an appetite for our views to be heard across many different countries at the moment? It is mixed, to tell the truth. All finance ministers at the moment face the same demands that we do here in Ireland. Large debts, and a need to borrow an awful lot of money at the moment, and every country is trying to find ways to increase the amount of tax that they raise. So we just have to be aware of that and just have to calmly and carefully make our case. And as you know today, Pat, what we are doing is launching a public consultation in relation to where an agreement could stands at the moment, and we have a lot of work ahead of us in the coming months with regard to this issue.
Now, people might be cynical and suggest that launching a public consultation, which will extend right into September, is the construction of a fig leaf behind which you would ultimately be able to hide, saying, well, the public's okay with 15%, so that's why I'm doing it.
That's not the approach that I can ever see myself taking with regard to this. If you look at where we are at the moment, as you've acknowledged in your earlier questions, we have made a decision not to be in an agreement at the moment, which has been the source of significant scrutiny and indeed criticism from some. And any decision that I make in relation to this issue in the coming months, weeks or years will not be about saying I'm doing this because the public want me to do it or because a particular interest within our economy want to do it. It will be up to me to make a recommendation to government and then to own and advance and communicate why I believe it's the right thing to do. The reason why we're launching the public consultation today, Pat, is even with the ambiguity that is in the agreement at the moment, there's a huge amount of detail in it. And that detail only emerged over the last few weeks. And I think it's important that this be considered by our business and broader community at the moment.
Now, you've obviously been looking at the upsides and the downsides. Clearly, the downsides have won the argument at the moment because you want to stick with the 12.5%. But people will be trying to figure out now, okay, 15% is bigger than 12.5%, and it's applied across the board. Therefore, the minister gets a pretty substantial hike in revenue because it'll apply not just to multinationals, but to every small and medium enterprise that pays corporation tax as well. So that's a big bonus for the minister. So what's he going to lose? Are companies going to pull out? Are companies that were going to invest not going to invest because they saw our tax rate as a sweetener?
So the issue that we're confronting here is that the change in the rate to at least a minimal rate in the future is not the only part of the agreement. What is also contained in the draft statement at the moment is a very considerable change in where taxes are levied and how they are paid. And what many are advocating at the moment is that that project continues in parallel with a change in the rate. So if you look at what that means, the change in what's referred to as taxing rights means that we could lose up to €2 billion in annual corporate tax revenue per year, probably in 3 to 4 years' time. So that's where the revenue loss would come from. And in relation to what a higher rate could mean, one of the things we would need to consider is, does a higher rate reduce our competitiveness versus other economies? And in turn, would that affect the retention and creation of jobs within our country, which of course would also have an impact on tax revenue in the future?
Now, how much agreement does the OECD need for this to go ahead? If we're a member of the OECD, do we have to go along with this if there's a majority? Because you and I will remember discussing the various treaties over the years that we were all asked to vote upon. And one of these, the bulwarks of the arguments for voting for these treaties in the EU was that taxation is a national competence. And now we're being, as I would put it, bullied by the OECD into abandoning that principle.
So it is up to us and up to any country regarding whether they want to be in this framework or not. So it is up to us at the end of the day to decide, do we want to exit any future agreement? That would bring additional consequences that would merit consideration before that choice is taken. But to deal with your question on decision making, in relation to the rather technical but really important issue of where and how taxes are collected, that would require it to be agreed by all members of the OECD. Because in order for the agreement to be reached on this and then implemented, everybody has to be part of that agreement.